Hello everyone, welcome to Chessvisor. In today's video, I'm going to show you another interesting encounter between Daniel Naroditsky and Magnus Carlsen. This is from Title Tuesday, March 19, late edition. Without much delay, let's get started. With the white pieces, Daniel Naroditsky starts the game with 1 e4 and we have Sicilian by Magnus. c3, the Alpian variation, e5, grabbing space, knight f3 hits the pawn, knight c6 defends the pawn and then bishop to c4, knight f6 and then knight to g5. So he's attacking the pawn, but now he goes for the it's kind of what do you say, the knight's attack in the Italian opening, and he plays pawn to d5. After e takes d5, knight takes d5. Now if you are thinking about the fried liver attack, actually you can do it, but not in this position. You have to play this pawn to d4 first, and then after c takes d4, here you have a chance to sacrifice the knight on f7. So you can actually do it like this. After king takes f7, queen f3 check, king e6, and this is going to be a very interesting game. But unfortunately in the game, Daniel Naroditsky did not go for this, but he played queen f3 directly, threatening mate in 1. So bishop e6 defends that, knight takes e6, f takes e6, doubles the pawn in the center of the board, and then he simply castles. After bishop c5, as you can see, the bishop is undefended, so he plays knight to d2, trying to take advantage of the bishop's post. After queen d7, he puts the knight in the center of the board and attacks the bishop. And also, in this position, actually, Carlsen is trying to castle the queen z, but he stops it by knight to e4. So bishop to b6, and now he plays queen to h5 check. And here, actually, Carlsen played king to d8, just trying to keep king in the center. That was not a good choice, but if you consider moves like g6, this is completely playable. But the problem is, in the later part of the game, let's say the queen goes to h3 or h4, probably h4, because to keep an eye on this f6 square. And now after this move, you can simply capture on d5. Probably he's going to recapture the pawn, but then that is, this idea is always there, so you have to watch out for that. So maybe considering that he did, I think he didn't want to weaken the king structure, on the pawn structure on the king side. So he plays king to d8. So bishop to b5, pinning down the knight. And also sometimes if he wants, actually he can take on c6 and win the pawn on e5, or the pawn which he gambited in the opening. Queen to e8, threatening or trying to exchange the queens off the board. Probably you should not exchange the queens, right? So he plays queen g5 check and then king c7. So in this position, you could black with the the queen here. In this position, now if you black like this, then we can play bishop into c6. If you play, or if you take the queen, then we can go bishop takes g5 check. So first you have to recapture the pawn, the piece, and then now you can tuck the queen exchange by taking on e5. So this is almost like winning position for white. So after king to c7, this is also, it's kind of last position for Magnus. And here Daniel Naroditsky did not play the best option in the position, but he plays one of the best moves, pawn to c4. Instead of that, he could have tried bishop into c6, and now you cannot take with the queen because g7 is hanging, and also it comes with the check, and you have to block the check with the queen, and then you are going to lose so many pawns in the center of the board, which you don't want to do, right? So in this position, the brave move, that is king takes e6, is playable, but then still queen takes e5. But this time you don't lose the g7 pawn with the check, but d6 is kind of completely weakened, so you have to bring the rook or the bishop to the game. If you bring, say for example, bishop to c7, then you lose another pawn. And here actually Daniel Naroditsky actually captured 2 pawns. That means he not only recovered the pawn, but he is up a pawn currently. So this could have happened if he went down with this line, that is bishop takes c6, but in the game he played pawn to c4. This is also completely playable. Queen to g6, trying to exchange the queens again, but this time again he plays c takes d5, trying to trick him. There is no trick actually, there is no check also, because if you take on g5, there is no check while we recapture with the bishop or the knight. So but he inserts this move, c takes d5. After e takes d5, so here if you take on g5, there is this problem. Maybe this in between move, d6 is a problem. So king to d7 is kind of forced, and then bishop takes g5. As you can see, this pawn is it's like a little thorn in the black's camp. But the problem is, it looks like a weak pawn, but you cannot actually challenge this guy, because once I take this knight out, I can simply put the bishop on e7 square to hold this pawn forever, and that's a problem. And also this knight is not going anywhere, and this is going to be centralized for the rest of the game because this sits on a light square and you have a dark square bishop. That's a problem, right? But in the game he plays e takes d5 and then queen takes g6, doubling his pawns, and then plays knight to g5. Rook a e8 was try to push down the pawn, because knight to g5 is not a normal move. It's kind of a threat already, maybe to land on f7 to fork the pawn as well as the rook. So bishop to d2. Yeah, here you might be thinking there is a blunder because now we cannot play this move, right? But we can insert this move, bishop into c6. The pawn a6 threatening the bishop. The bishop drops back. Rook hf8 and then pawn to g3, pawn to d3. So as you can see, this is a position where you know it looks like white is having an advantage throughout the game. But the problem with this position is that practically black is kind of better. It's because of this pawn, maybe like pawn mass in the center of the board. So this is going to be very what do you say, very dangerous thing for white actually. These three pawns together and going down, and that's actually like this d3 pawn is already just two moves away from queening, so that's a real threat for white. Let's see how he manages that. Rook a c1, pinning down the knight, king to d6, and then king to g2, pawn to e4, covering f3, bishop f4 check. But this time here actually Magnus gives up the exchange and sacks the rook. Rook takes f4, g takes f4. This in fact that was the one of the best move in the position. G takes f4, or after that rook f8, knight to h3 defending. And as you can see, Magnus can now target this newly weakened pawn. So he brings the knight into the game. So knight to d4, and then bishop to d1, just trying to head over to this square where the knight is coming. So he plays knight to e6, and then bishop, so king to g3, because there was the immediate threat. Bishop a5, and also he is trying to add one more attacker to this position, or the pawn. Bishop g4, trying to remove the attacker. Bishop to d2 anyway, and then rook to c d1, because the rook is under attack. So bishop takes f4 check, knight takes f4, knight takes f4, and then rook to d2 and pawn to d4. So after pawn to d4, rook e1 was tried, and here after king to d5, defending the pawn, he plays pawn to h4, just trying to stop the g5 moves. Pawn to a5, pawn to a4, rook f6, trying to lift the rook and trying to target the new weaknesses while defending the pawns. Bishop to c8, attacking the pawn. So he is not reacting immediately, rather he gives the check. King to g2. Repetition happened like only 2 times, but then in the second move itself, white moved the king to a different square. So rook b6. Okay, he is keeping an eye on the b2 square. So bishop g4, and then rook to b4, threatening the pawn. And here after bishop to d1, he defends it. As you can see, the bishop, it is like what do you say? It's an excellent piece. It is traveling here and there just like that, slicing the board in the off. So pawn to b5, and here interestingly, Daniel Naroditsky did not capture this pawn. Actually, the capturing the pawn is the right way to continue the game. Rook into b5 and then pawn to b3. This is the right continuation, because we can target this pawn now, because the bishop is taking care of the b3 now. But in the game he plays king to h2. After bishop takes b takes a4, and then he plays king to g3, threatening the knight here. So this is the critical moment of this game. What would you play? Now your knight is under attack. How would you defend this? If you are black, what would you do? Just try to pause the video and find it. In the game, actually, Magnus blended it away. The game is blended away. It is equal game, okay? He can hold this game, okay? But in the game, he played this move, king to e5, bringing the king into the self-pinning mode, and that allows Daniel Naroditsky play this move, bishop f3. After knight h5 check, king g2, and then knight f4 check, king to g3, knight h5 check, and then king to h2, knight to f6. It looks like he is defending the pawn, but it actually not, because now we can sacrifice the bishop on e4, bringing the knight in the pin, and then after pawn f3, you can play any move you want, and then f takes e4. Now you are a whole rook up, and this is dead lost. And whatever black was hoping, or Magnus was hoping, and the pawn structure was ruined, and it is completely destroyed, and now it's a couple of weak pawns just to be waiting to be captured. And after king e5, he played king to g3, rook b3, king to f3, and then pawn to a3, b takes a3, rook takes a3, rook e d1, rook c3, rook takes d3, and then rook to c4, rook b1, rook c5, rook to b8, and then a4, rook to e8 check. And in this position, Magnus simply resigned the game. Why would he resign? It's because simply he is going to lose this pawn, and once this pawn falls, he is going to target the new pawn. So considering this only, Magnus simply resigned, and Daniel Naroditsky wins the game here. Maybe a sample variation runs like this: king to, let's say, king f6, and then rook takes d4, pawn to a3, rook to a8, rook c3 check, king f4, and then there is no check. So rook b3, and then we can double the rooks and get the pawn, and there is no point in continuing this game because he's a whole rook up. So that's why, Magnus designed the game. I hope you enjoyed this quick review of this game. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up, and still if you're not subscribed to ChessVisor, please consider subscribing to it, and also turn the bell notification to get the instant updates to your inbox. And as usual, this is ChessVisor, your wise choice to improve your chess.